Paul, welcome.
Hey, John. Morning.
So thank you for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'll do my best. I'm Toronto born, real estate agent. I've been in real estate now, this month or this year, I guess you'd call it. I'm celebrating 25 years in real estate, and it's almost impossible for me to believe that I've been doing it this long. I still feel like I'm just getting started. And that's sort of, the energy that I try to bring to the process. But podcasting is something that has sort of taken over. And I jokingly said when I started my show, it's called Real Estate Podcast Show, which again you couldn't get more obvious in terms of a title.
Yeah.
And I had one of those moments. One day I woke up. I did the podcast for about a year, and then I'm like, well, what is this? What am I doing? It's a real estate podcast show. So thinking like there's no chance I'm going to be able to go on to my domain server, my domain name guy, and type this in. There's no chance I'm going to get this. There's no way like 1,000 people haven't done it, and there it was. Nobody had taken the title, so I'm like, okay, well, so that was 2018, 2019. I started podcasting, and it was literally like a lifeline. I felt like I'd found a new career that I could easily do um, within real estate, but I could also, if for any reason at all, real estate was not an option. It's like one of those jokes where a certain favorite song isn't an option. What favorite song would you pick from a band? For me, if real estate wasn't an option, um, for whatever reason, I would be totally fine doing this and spending time with great collaborators like you and just basically being a guest on people's show.
So that's kind of interesting. For at least the podcasting portion, because when I was growing up in high school and college, I was really big into talk radio, like guy talk radio.
Okay.
Was that, and so because of that, it kind of, as time progressed and technology got better, podcasting became a thing. So just kind of curious, were you into talk radio before you got into podcasting?
Nothing to do with radio. In terms of like talk radio,
Hmm.
for me, everything to do with radio was music. So I was completely, um, I was totally into music, but I was also like always a big fan of storytelling. I read, I still read like 10 or 15 books at a time. I've got a short attention span, so I'll start a book. I'll put it away. I'll start another one. I'll put it away. I'll start another one. I'll literally get phone calls from the library right down the street. I moved somewhere that I actually had. There's two things that I always need close: a gym and a library. And in where I live now, it's actually in the same building.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a city-run facility, but it's got everything I need. It's got the library, it's got the gym. I spend a good chunk of my day there. But for me, John, it was listening to podcasts and mostly not listening, or sorry, not hearing anything about what I was doing.
Mhm.
So I don't think in prior to 20, like, I mean, I think the whole world changed. Obviously, it did change in
Mhm.
2020. Podcasting became so, sort of like it just rose out of the ashes. But prior to that, and again, I know maybe there was a few podcasts, but my joke is there probably was three real estate podcasters, but the other two were dead. Back then, I don't know who was doing it, but I wasn't hearing anything about what I was doing or anything real estate related. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take a shot in the dark and start this again. And I've got it. I still got it with me to keep me humble. I started with a $9 microphone from a local computer shop here in Toronto, and probably like just absolutely terrible sounding. I had no idea. I didn't like my own voice. Definitely was not comfortable with any video crap.
Mhm.
Still getting used to that, by the way.
Mhm.
But No, not really anything to do with talk radio, but you're saying that was the thing for you that got you interested?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to people have candid conversations and just not really knowing, unscripted, like you just never know
Hmm.
where it's going to go. Uh, Plus, there's a lot of value in hearing someone, just like a regular person, talk about their own experience versus, again, having some type of script already created.
I'm with you on that. I think the unscripted conversations, like just coffee shop talk,
Mhm.
literally just two of us, like in real estate, it happens all the time. And one of the other reasons I'll tell you, I've shared this on other podcasts, but one of the reasons I started the podcast is because I wanted to be able to have those conversations. And I was having them at conferences with people, like some of the biggest realtors in the planet. I was having these great conversations with them. And then once it was over, it was done. Like
Mhm.
that conversation disappears.
Yeah.
The beauty of doing that, the conversations here is that they never disappear. They literally will be floating around in the atmosphere probably a lot longer than I'm around. And that's sort of interesting to me to be able to have great, powerful conversations with people, smart people, interesting people of all, from all backgrounds. So business owners, anybody I can learn from, anybody who's ever, athletes, comedians, business people. Um, I've tried to have everybody possible on my show because if you learn from people who are good at their profession, you can pick out those features. You can see, oh yeah, those things, those people have those things in common. And that's just like from probably from sports, um, mental training from sports, but just, basically finding out who the winners are and finding out, okay, what do they do? What are they doing differently? What are they doing better than me? So,
Yeah, it's some advice that I always give new people, and haven't always followed it myself, but figure out what is it you want to do in the market that you want to do it in, and then just follow them. Take bits and pieces of what they're doing and then
oh
apply it to
yeah, yeah.
yourself, or find value and work with them in one way or another.
I think it's I'm trying to remember the term is R&D, rip off and duplicate.
Yep,
So
exactly.
it's not research and development, it's rip off and duplicate. And it doesn't mean that you're doing it exactly their way, but
Mhm.
you're doing it like you're following a lot of those cadences, you're following a lot of those patterns.
Mhm.
Um, and even for even for people that I'm trying to help, I'm actually starting really probably next week. I'm starting to mentor a friend of mine, and this is just one of my dad friends, one of the friends I made when my kids were in school. And our kids are older now, and one of his sons is 17, and he wants to get into real estate. So one of the things I'm going to be teaching him that was never taught to me, and no real estate company will ever teach you this. Sorry to break the bubble, but no real estate training will ever prepare you for real estate. It's there's a whole bunch of marketing and sales and all this other stuff that you'll need to know. And in his case, I'm going to be basically just sort of giving him all the stuff that I've copied, all the stuff that I've duplicated, all the reverse engineering, which I like that because it sounds like a really fancy way of ripping
Mhm.
things off. But
Yeah.
and there's a really good book. I don't have it in front of me. I don't have my Kindle here, but it's a really good book on that that I've read and I've reread a few times on reverse engineering and how it happens. Uh, you know, in most on most levels of life. So
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you're mentoring. You have I guess, a mentee. Just out of curiosity, are you charging the mentee?
no, 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 no. This
Mm.
isn't something. It's not something I'm doing for a job, or it's not something I would do for extra money. It's something I'm doing purely for a favor to a friend,
Mhm.
and almost like in a way, it's almost like me being a mentor to myself. So
Mm.
I actually get to, I actually get to spend time with this guy. And his kids are great kids, so it's not like I even have to. I mean, if you're 17 and you're thinking about that you want to be into real estate at 17 or 18 or whatever it was during those years, I was I wasn't real estate focused yet, but I was finance focused. So
Mhm.
I was in the library doing my thing with my, and I've been doing this since those days. Like I was in the library on a Saturday with my stack of 10 books, and I still have my Personal Finance for Dummies book. It's still up in my bookshelf, and it's the same book that I've actually given to my kids, to my nieces, to my nephews, to everybody that I want, like to just be able to understand those basic concepts that, you know, I know they're talking about it in schools, but they're still very like they're years, light years
Yeah.
behind what you need to know by the time you get out of high school. There's so much that you have to know to be able to survive. And a
Mhm.
lot of kids, and I'm talking about people with university degrees that I meet, even in my business, do not have financial skills of any kind.
Right.
They
Mhm.
they've got all these degrees, but they're not on the same level with the financial decisions, just learning investments and of course real estate. So
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I ask is because typically, I mean, I've heard this from a lot of people where when you start to actually pay for something, you start to take it more seriously. In this case, you have a very close relationship with your friend's son,
yeah,
so it's probably very different. But then if you were to go out and do something like that and people ask you, "Oh, why are you charging?"
yeah.
I mean, do you agree with that?
You know what? You're right. Obviously, for the purposes of like having value to something, um, in most cases you do have to charge somebody. But again, the difference here is I know this guy, and we've helped each other out on a lot of different things, and our kids, or even our kids, my son and his younger son are best friends. So for that matter, again, I do most almost anything for these, for
Yeah.
this family. But
Hmm.
as far as charging anybody when they were, for example, at this age, to me, there's sort of I sort of remember the relationship of when you're young, you've got all this time
Hmm.
and not money and no money. And this
Yeah.
family, they don't have a lot of money. So even if I did charge normally, I wouldn't charge them. But as you get older, you'll end up having more money and less time.
Hmm.
So as you get older, yes, of course, all of us have to sort of pay the bills and invest in things. But when you're a young person, as far as I'm concerned, especially early in life, you've got all the time in the world, but you don't really have any money. So you literally have to figure out, how do I get the education, the training, the mentoring that I need, and is it from the right person, versus just sort of a boxed generic type approach.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So I'd like to go back 25 years. What were you doing? Where were you at in life when you decided to get into real estate?
Very good question. I was definitely I was in a different career altogether. I was in the fitness industry. So I was working in fitness clubs for most of the 90s. From I guess since I was about 16, I was working in a gym, and I worked there for 11 years. I worked in the gym business at the same time as I was starting real estate because I wasn't 100% sure I was going to, do this for a living. And nobody else, there was nobody in my family that had ever done this business. I came from a construction family background, so it was all pretty much, you go into that kind of work and that's it.
Mhm.
So before that, it was the fitness industry. And just like a lot of parts of life, I had no idea that that element of my life would be so helpful to the next chapter. And the reason I say that, John, is because when I went from fitness in uh, being in the fitness industry in the 90s and I went into real estate, I actually was able to jump into real estate with a phone book full of people's names and emails. At that time, emails were still pretty early, but I had probably about a list of about 3,000 people that I would communicate with, gym members.
Mhm.
So I would be talking to them and we'd have conversations like we're doing. So this is just part of it. And it was all, phone calls and, meeting people there at the gym, helping them out with their training. So the thing about that is I was spending, like, in some cases when I was personal training, I was spending, 8 to 10 hours a week with people, and you get to know them. Like, you get to
Yeah.
know their whole life. They'll tell you, and this is probably any personal trainer will tell you this, like, we go beyond the level of psychiatrists, because there's not really even a barrier. It's not like people think that, we're going to solve those problems. They usually just, as they're working out, you just hear everything that's going on, all the good, all the bad, all the ugly
Mhm.
stuff they
Right.
might not even tell their partners. So it was really like out of this world, and you get close to these people, so you actually, know a lot about them. So I was able to go into real estate with, you know, a database, like a Rolodex, so to speak, of, 3,000 plus people, which was an unbelievably unfair advantage. So, because a lot of people in starting this business, they don't know 100 people.
Mhm.
And I still have a lot of those clients to this day. So
So you went into the retail industry, you were selling, you became an agent?
I went from fitness, and there was one sort of midpoint in between. The decision was going to be, do I start my own gym? And I was 25, 26 when I started thinking about that idea. Do I start my own gym, or do I go into real estate? I had bought my first home at 24. So I was already sort of deep into the investing part of it. This was before I became a realtor. So I already sort of had a taste for that, and I liked how that was going, and I was doing pretty well. I was already starting to make some money on that first purchase. And I realized that I could either take that money that I made from that house and put it into a gym, or I could take that money and make that my seed money to start my career. And I was still with my girlfriend at the time, who's been my wife now for over 20 years. She
Congratulations.
basically gave me sort of the sort of the nudge, because she saw that I wasn't enjoying the fitness business. Again, it's a great business. It's extremely rewarding, but not financially.
Mhm.
And it was literally like, if I wanted to have a family, if I wanted to sort of spread my wings and do big things, it wasn't going to be at that level. So either I was going to buy my own gym and start from scratch, and that was sort of a scary venture, because again, you're taking a huge risk, or I'm going to go into real estate and, sort of start start investing in properties, helping other people do the same, and do a way better job than the guy who worked for me. That was really, I was almost doing it out of spite. I wanted to
Mhm.
basically just be a better agent than the one I had, because the one I had sucked.
Well, spite is sometimes the best motivation.
It's literally, it's how I paid for my house.
Mhm.
I would say spite is a big part of how I've done, a lot of the big things I've done is absolutely spite,
Mhm.
but turned into, positive, like not just sitting there, angry
Yeah.
about life, just
Mhm.
saying, okay, I'll show them. And
Yeah.
I know it's not just me. I know, maybe you've got a story about that. So
Yeah. Yeah, many stories.
yeah.
Um, okay, so then you have your first investment property. How did you even know how to evaluate it?
Um, I think as far as how to evaluate it, like how to know that it was a good value,
Mhm.
like going in,
Yeah.
well, I guess I'll give you the numbers. At that time, this was like 1998, and housing prices in Toronto were like in the 160 to 180 range for a house.
Mhm.
And I don't know where I got the ability to figure this out, but I just basically figured, if I can get a house for, you know, 20 or 30 or 40,000 below that, I think I should be okay. And it was just instinct, total raw instinct. Again, nobody in my family, like my family is one of those, they came over from Italy, bought one house and stayed in that one house for I don't know how many years. So they weren't doing any of this stuff. So for me, it was like, what do I, how do I figure out what's the right thing? So I ended up finding a place that was in an area that was new to me, but definitely on the uprise. It was sort of up and coming neighborhood. I noticed that things were happening. I also have to say that this was in the 90s in Toronto, where it was literally the whole decade was a decade of decline. The whole decade was like prices were dropping like lower and lower every year. So going into it, even going into the market at that time, was pretty stupid
Mhm.
on paper. It didn't make a lot of sense. So I just ended up figuring out, okay, here's how much I can spend. I went to the bank. They shook me up and down. They basically made sure that I was good for the loan. So they ended up lending me, I think, 140, something like that. That was what 5% down. So I did the minimum, of course, because that's all I had. So 5% down, and I bought the place for 140, and held on to it for a couple of years, and ended up making like a really nice profit on the first time I sold it. And that profit was what allowed me to invest in becoming a realtor. And there's no way, and this wasn't a huge amount of money. Maybe it was 30 grand,
Mhm.
but back then, especially at my age in my 20s, I could live off 1,000 a month. Like
Right.
I didn't need much. So I figured out where could I stay, um, how I was going to do this. So I decided to put all that effort into getting the license, and started in, I guess, made my first sale in, was it, I guess I got licensed in October 2000, and I made my first sale in November, and
Wow.
just kept going.
So then do you still have investment properties now?
Right now, I had a number of them, so I sort of did a thing where I would buy one, sell one, buy one, trade up to another one, trade up to another one. Like I did that for a bunch of times, and then basically what I did was I sold. We basically sold our main properties in the early 2020s. We sold a bunch of properties, so we sort of slimmed down the portfolio a little bit. But the reason we did that was because I think all of us, myself and even other investors I know, sort of felt like post pandemic, like 2022 specifically, and it's still the case. That particular year was absolutely on fire. So it was a
Mhm.
great time to sort of bring down and sort of, I guess, lean out the portfolio, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I've always got my investment hat on. It's just part of who I am.
Right. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm actually unloading all of my single family homes to
All
get
right.
into larger assets and to do more lending too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good for you.
thank you.
Yeah.
So then what's your main focus at the moment?
Well, again, I guess the main shift for me, and this is again part of why the only reason we're even talking is because of the fact that I sort of jumped into podcasting as sort of extension of real estate. And what what I'm finding now, and this is just after a long period of hard work, and just showing up and just keeping the podcast going. So I'm talking about now. I guess I'm in year 7 of this. So started in 2018, 2025 now. Um, for me, the main focus right now is to uh, continue growing my business, and obviously that's never stopped. But the way it's growing, because of the podcast, and just because of the fact that this has led to some absolutely amazing connections like yourself, uh, like the people that have joined me on my show, And just this year, I've started something. Sorry, just not this year, but just late last year, like fall 2024, I just started the process of looking into podcast sponsors. And it's something that I just didn't either know about or feel good about until a certain point. And then it was a discussion that literally my wife and I had. We were at Costco one afternoon, and when you're married with kids, Costco sometimes is where you go for a date. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's just how life goes.
Well, I'm
So
with you. On date night, the last time we went, my wife and I date night, we went to a grocery store, and we just
okay,
so
just
completely
you
understand.
know what, and we figured this out early on. We go, you know what, if we have an afternoon off and the kids are at school, we can go for lunch. I mean, it's date night. That's
Yeah.
it's just wherever it is. So we were at Costco having lunch, and just because the kids were occupied, we just said, okay, we're gonna go and do this. So we're talking about it, and she's the one that sort of sometimes gives me that little push and says, I think there's enough people listening, there's enough good buzz that you probably should start, so open the gate and let some sponsors jump in. And I could not, I just because of that whole, forget what it's called, but that sort of that inner voice that tells you, like, who the hell do you think is going to be listening to this thing? So
Yeah.
whatever that voice is that's sort of always in my head, I was thinking, okay, so I'll open the gates up, but it's not gonna, people are not gonna jump out of the woodwork. And it was the opposite. I literally had like these billion-dollar companies um, jump on board, like literally within the first week. I'm talking about like Coke, Chevrolet, TikTok, Wayfair, Live Nation, like this list of names, and it's grown way beyond anything I could imagine as sponsors that want to be part of what's happening with podcasting. And it has nothing to do with me. I think it has everything to do, and this is maybe for you, John, maybe anybody listening that's into podcasting, it has nothing to do with necessarily me, but it has to do with the fact that I was there at the right time. I'm here at the right time doing this thing. And a lot of the people who are out there looking for ways to promote their brands, they know that podcasting, and again, this is way beyond anything I'm doing, but they know that podcasting is literally changing the world in some ways. And it goes without saying that whether you're into politics or not, the politics, the politics that happen in the U.S., um, I'd call that the podcast election. And it doesn't matter whether you're for this guy or for that guy. It had to do with who was out there doing the analysis, realizing that if you're on the right 5 or 10 or 15 podcasts, it literally could change who your audience is, who the people that listen to you, who even knows about you.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, this is something that another Canadian talks about, Dan Martell. He
oh yeah,
says guesting on other people's podcasts or having your own podcast is has some of the highest ROI in terms of just getting eyeballs on you. It's just a really efficient way to market.
smart guy
Yeah.
to say that. And again, for me, I'm always looking into um, and this isn't even me. This is Dan Kennedy. I don't know if you're a fan of his or if you've read any of his books.
Mhm.
Just an absolute marketing genius. One of the things he's always talked about is if you can figure out a way to do zero cost marketing, you're going to be ahead of most people. And even early on in podcasting, I realized that it's not exactly zero cost, but it's not the kind of cost marketing, at least it isn't right now, where it's going to like require, thousands and thousands of dollars to be part of.
Right.
So if you can be, if you can be involved, if you can guest on people's shows, if you can, again, if you can carry a show, if you've got nothing to say, if you've got no interesting stories to tell, I mean, that's probably not going to be good for you. So
Mhm.
if you've got interesting stories, if you know interesting people, or if you're willing to have interesting people on your show, which is for me what I've always thought about is be interested, not interesting. So
Yeah.
if I can be interested in people and like just the thing we're doing today, rather than focus on myself being interesting all the time, I think people are going to get tired of just me talking about me. And it's way better if it's me talking to you and talking about things and about events and about, life and going to Costco. There's going to be other people who are going to, relate to that on some level, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I relate to it. Our kids get excited for Costco because they have those giant refrigerator rooms. They call them magic mirrors. I don't know why, but
Really?
yeah, they love going in there.
Sorry, who does? Who goes
My
in there?
my daughters.
Oh wow. Okay. They like
Yeah,
going in the freezer rooms. That's
yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, I didn't have to, I don't think we had to drag our kids to Costco when they were, especially when they were young, because there was always like enough stuff for kids where it keeps them, they're enticed.
yeah,
And then as far as, adults go, it's like, you're in this warehouse of food.
yeah.
And it's, sometimes it's like they're making fresh food there, those roasted chickens for $7,
Hmm.
whatever they cost, $5 maybe for you guys.
Yeah,
um it's no brainer. A lot of the stuff, of course, the $1.50 hot dog, it's a dollar
yeah.
fifty here too, by the way. It's not, there's no conversion on that.
And
So
it's never
they
changed. It's always been $1.50.
it's never exchanged. So that's there. If it's again, the rumor is that they're losing money on that cafeteria, but I don't believe it. Not when I walk out
Yeah.
after having, went way beyond my um my whatever my grocery list was.
Hmm.
I've usually gone over that by at least 10%. So I'm pretty sure they're doing okay in most respects.
Anything less than triple digits is a win in my book.
Well, yeah, obviously less than triple digits is
Yeah,
great. I've sort of joked about, yeah, trying to go in there with $100 budget,
yeah.
and seeing how far I could go, but it's usually not that simple of an exercise.
No.
No.
Um, okay, so uh, let's talk about mindset. What are some of the biggest mindset issues or hurdles that you'd have to get over? You had to get over.
Mindset. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think mindset training and mindset philosophy, like that kind of stuff for me probably started in my sport days. So I wouldn't say that I had any connection or any sort of desire to be any good at sports until high school. Um, I was like every other kid. They just put me in every sport and I just
Mhm.
sort of played it and I was okay. And then got to high school and found out that I was really good at contact sports and started playing football my first year, but discovered a game that I'd never heard about before and was never talked about on any level. Still probably isn't talked about in most schools, but rugby. So I started learning rugby in grade 9 as well as football. And in the summer of my grade 9, um, year is when I started training rugby. And the reason I started that sport was because some friends of mine had mentioned that if you like the contact of football, which I love that part, and I never experienced that before. That for me was literally like psychology, not psychology. It was like medicine. And I was an angry teenager, and I had a lot of built up anger. My parents had gone through a divorce. I didn't like a lot of things at that time. So the license to hit people was like, it was my medicine. And I'm not a violent person. It's just strange that that particular that outlet was there for me. But working out in the gym, like just going way beyond my limits, all that, I was already doing that even in grade 9. I knew that that was a good outlet for me. I don't know how, but I just knew it was like literally like taking the air out of my, like, anger and all that other stuff. So I was able to do that. And as that happened, I think my mindset started to click in at that age, in terms of, just understanding that a certain amount of work will probably lead to you doing very well in certain things. And it doesn't really matter if you have a built-in like natural anything. Like if you're not a natural athlete, and I don't think I was probably, and I still hate running, but the running part of the sport I could put up with because um, there was something more to it. So I sort of shifted my mindset into that. And I'd say that it became like I became captain of that team. We ended up being the first rugby team that ever won a gold medal in the school board for that sport. So that did a tremendous amount of shifting for my mindset. And all of the lessons I learned, and this is where I'm getting to with my long winded story, all the lessons I learned from sports, all of them translated into business. Like that same competitiveness, you know, having that attitude where you just get up and go, and even just the saying where action solves everything. And this is something that I've heard from different people over the years said different ways. But just again, if you don't want to go, and this is the proof, if maybe you'll maybe you've experienced this, John, but the day you don't want to go to the gym and work out is the day you should.
Mhm.
Like you'll have the best workout of your life. Like you've got to force yourself in, you've got to put your shoes on. You're going to be upset about it. You don't want to be there. You're not feeling good, but you just push through that, and you're literally like, I think because of everything that happens with a workout or work or whatever, you literally like figure out a way to push through those certain things, and you're proud of yourself because you just went, and B, your adrenaline levels, you know, for some reason they're skyrocketing. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but it's like just the opposite of what you think. Like the days that you don't want to get up, and the days that I'm not really interested in doing a podcast and don't have the energy to do it, those sometimes end up being the best ones. You know, I don't know what the word for it is, but for me, that's sort of my mindset training. That's sort of where it comes from.
Yeah, it's amazing advice. I mean, you always hear that motivation itself is temporary. It's how can you push yourself on the days when you're not motivated?
Hmm.
That's the most important.
And that's going to be most days. Like you're going to
Yeah.
like look at certain things of life. You're going to be looking at certain elements of your life, um, life, business, health. You're going to look at certain things and just be, man, you know, I just want to sit in a chair and just like let other people do things. Like I don't want to be the one that has to go out there and you know, meet with 20 people or do anything. Like there's going to be days where it's
Mhm.
going to be really hard to do. And again, those are basically where you sort of you earn your stripes, so to speak, is literally by just getting out there and doing stuff, and like yourself starting a podcast. Um, and for me too, it was like part of this was going to be the fear of just, you know, A, who's going to want to talk to me about any of this stuff, and B, um, like, you know, is it going to be just me having to do all the talking, or will they talk? Stuff like that that used to be an issue for me. Now I have zero. There's again, I think, and it's just the rule is I think if you do anything 100 times, you're going to be good at it.
Mhm.
At this point now, I've done this about 1,000 times. Like I've probably done just 1,200 or 1,300 of these podcasts, combination of solo and interviews. But just being in front of the microphone, I think you just get used to it. You get over yourself. That's for sure. That's the good news. Is if anybody's listening and you're worried about what your voice sounds like, nobody cares what your voice
Yeah.
sounds like. No, not even like no one, like the only person that would care would be you,
Mhm.
and nobody else is going to care. And eventually you realize you shouldn't even care. It's just so not important. So just get out there. If you got a story to tell, tell it. And if you can be on a podcast and telling a story, as your friend Dan told you, it literally is like, you know, it could be a life-changing experience versus doing all that conventional stuff that maybe you've been told to do, like the conventional marketing, you know,
Mhm.
the conventional Facebook ads and all that stuff. And some of those work. But there's just something more to, I think, what we're doing here.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because people get to know you as a person, and people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Well, Paul, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and talking about your history and everything. So how can people work with you and how can people reach out to you?
Again, John, the pleasure was all mine. The fact that you were, again, sort of willing to take a chance and have me on the show, to me, that's always a huge first thing. So thank you for having me on. Best way to reach me, I try to keep things simple, and it's literally because I'm that way. Either
Mhm.
realestatepodcastshow.com, where you can just reach me for everything, or email is the other way. Again, I'm still old school. I believe email, greater sign, social media. I believe email is superior to social media in terms of so many ways, and just the fact that not a lot of people think that way anymore. Um, to me, is something I'm trying to change. But email for me is Paul at realestatepodcastshow.com.
Okay. And we will make sure to put those in the description just so it's easy for everyone.
Awesome, my
Paul,
friend.
yeah, thank you again for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.